Hi, Jim here, and you're listening to the Honest Filmmaker podcast. This week, I'm speaking to screenwriter and mentor Andrea Mann. Hi, Andrea. How are we doing?
Hi, I'm good, thanks, Jim. How are you?
Good. Thank you for joining me.
Thanks for having me.
Screenwriting is probably one of the bits I really struggle with when it comes to make a film, staring at that blank page. So I'm looking forward to chatting to somebody who knows the ins and outs of it all. But first of all, tell me a little bit about how long you've been doing this and where this started for you.
Oh, yeah, that's a good question. How long I've been doing this? I guess, oh gosh, maybe it's about 10 years or something, potentially, I guess, in terms of me really sort of starting to do it properly. And it started really, well, I'll start at the very beginning,
Yeah.
as you said so wisely. I grew up in the West Midlands, and my parents were both teachers. I went to the local comp. I did languages at university. So I've never studied film.
Mm.
And I think looking back on the sort of jobs that I then did, I was one of what Julia Cameron in the Artist Way calls a shadow artist. So I think I was around creative people, and I did sort of jobs where I was around creative people and sort of facilitating them. But didn't have the kind of confidence, I guess, or the wherewithal to sort of pursue those dreams myself at that age, in my 20s and 30s. And sorry, I've got a bit of a cough at the moment.
That's all right.
So, and actually one of my first jobs after university, what I did was sort of in my 20s for a while, was being a cinema manager. Right. So I actually put on other people's films because I just absolutely loved film. And in fact, even though I'd studied languages, I was kind of like, right, done with that. Let's do something that I'm actually really interested in now. And I knew I wanted to work in the arts. So if you sort of then fast forward a bit, I guess, I actually got into screenwriting. Well, I first had the idea of screenwriting when I was working in a cinema, in my mid-20s. And I remember us putting on some film. It was a really nice indie cinema. I love working there, but we put on some film, which shall remain nameless. But I remember thinking, I could do better than that. And of course, and then I bought Sid Field's book and then realized I couldn't really do better than that. And I didn't really know what I was doing, and I didn't know what I wanted to say or anything. So I kind of then just parked that, I guess, or gave up on that dream until many, many years later. And that then happened. I actually got into this, I guess, through writing topical comedy. So I was a freelance writer on websites, and I worked on news websites for AOL and stuff. I used to do their homepage and their newsletters and stuff. So it wasn't very creative, but I was around the news a lot. And I sort of found out, and it was around the time that Twitter was sort of the golden age of Twitter, I guess. And I think sort of a few people said that I was funny on Twitter, and I started finding out about sort of open door submissions places, and I started basically writing topical jokes. So I wrote jokes and sketches and parody songs, and I used to submit them to shows like News Review at the Canal Cafe Theatre in London, which has an open door policy, and also at the time there was Radio 4 Extras Newsjack, yeah, that's what it was called. So, and I was submitting to that. So they sort of gave me my first credits, I guess, because I would sort of bombard them with stuff every week. And I did a week on the news quiz, for example. I did an episode of Never Mind the Buzzcocks. And I think if you write comedy, though, everyone thinks you must want to write sitcoms.
Right.
And that's sort of the natural next step.
Yeah.
And I really didn't want to. I think partly because I was just thought it was going to be way too difficult, because it'd be really properly funny to write a sitcom. You have to have joke after joke after joke. And I guess I thought I wasn't really up to it. But also really going back to the cinema side of things, film was my big love. That was really, I'd always loved it as a teenager. I used to go on my own like some weirdo, and watch movies on my own. And I just love being in a cinema. I love film. So I thought, right, maybe I should actually have a go at doing this again. And I essentially kind of taught myself, I suppose, through books, through reading screenplays, going to the London Screenwriters Festival, did a short course at City Lit. And I wrote a terrible first feature film script, which will never see the light of day. And then I wrote a second script, and that got optioned. And that's what then sort of launched me.
Right.
Yeah.
Wow.
So
yeah, I guess the difference between me and you then is that first terrible screenplay I actually made. So I spent 2 years making the bloody thing, and then did another one that was bad. But then finally, obviously, yeah, learned more about writing. So as someone who's not started out and gone, I want to be a screenwriter, and gone straight into kind of education on that side, what are some of the really important first lessons do you think you learned about screenwriting? The kind of like base cement stuff that sort of help you can build on.
Yeah, I think the first things I sort of learned is that screenplays are very economical. And I remember I would sort of go and sort of obviously download screenplays and read them and stuff. And I remember reading, I can't remember actually what screenplay it was, but I remember being absolutely staggered by how short the scenes were in it. And I think when I wrote even the first iteration of my second script, which is the one that kind of launched me and got options and everything, so that worked out okay. But I think in that first iteration, I kind of chucked the kitchen sink at it. And I think I wanted to sort of say so much, and I wanted to involve all these things. And actually, screenplays, in terms of plot and dialogue and all that kind of thing, you don't need as much as you probably think you need. This is still a mistake I made. I kind of overwrite, as it were. I still probably put in way too much in a dialogue scene, when actually I could just take out that and take out that, and you could just have one line of dialogue and it says everything you need to say. So I think less is more. And I can't remember who it was. It might be Tony Gilroy, some screenwriter, who said that I think film screenplays especially are simple stories about complex emotions. And I think it's you don't have to have all this plot and that plot and these characters and that character. You actually just need to tell probably quite a simple story. But imbue that with richness and and honesty and all those sort of things. And I think the other thing that I learned, say, especially from my very first one that I wrote, is you have to have a kind of strong sort of through line of a plot and momentum. And that's the other way in which I guess screenplays are economical, good screenplays are, that everything has cause and effect and everything leads to everything else. You don't want it to be sort of too meandering, and then we go over here for a bit and then we go over there for a bit, sort of thing, especially with films, I guess. And I know more about film than TV writing. I think TV writing gives you more space to follow this and then follow that and that kind of thing. But generally speaking, you want absolutely everything to connect. You want everything to lead to everything else. And that gives you that kind of momentum and pace that you want in a screenplay. And you want everything to kind of, connect and be related in some way. You want to set something up here and pay it off over there, and you can also leave your audience to sort of make those connections as well. It's like you're sort of planting this stuff, and we as human beings who understand storytelling innately, I think, we do make these connections. It's like that great Billy Wilder quote, give the audience 2 + 2 and let them add it up to 4 and they'll love you forever, So I think that's the in terms of the craft of it, I think those are the biggest lessons I've had to learn.
Yeah, agree with that totally. And I think what I've noticed when you read a screenplay, a first screenplay, or from somebody who's not written one before, it's got very dense scene descriptions, because they're trying to show you the whole film that's in their head, rather than a good screenplays I've read. And the great thing is you can download all those ones that are nominated for Oscars. You can read the sort of cream of the crop. They are very succinct, but they still they've still got a vibe to them. They still sort of make you feel a certain way. And the other thing I notice is how much of a voice the writer has. So you've got, obviously your characters have a voice. They've got their individuals within your plot, but even within those scene descriptions, it's lovely when you read a script and that person describing that situation has got their own voice and their own perspective. So script optioned. So describe, how did that happen? How did you get a script optioned?
Yeah, good question. So it's completely spec. It wasn't based on anything. It was all just characters from my head, sort of romantic comedy drama, basically. There's sort of a long story, a short story, I guess. So it got optioned because I had an agent. That's a whole other kind of story as well. How I got an agent, because I kind of got, and I was very lucky to get her, basically, because I hadn't really written anything properly and stuff. And she'd taken me on. So we decided to sort of send it out in the world, because of course it was my first rodeo. I didn't really know what happens next, I was like, is it like, in Hollywood and stuff, do like people send out scripts to like tons of people and then you just wait, or do you send it to one person at a time and stuff? And she was like, well, we'll send it to a few people. We'll just start off with a few people. And this is, I guess, very, first what I'm about to tell you is a very niche story in some ways, but I do think there are wider lessons that we can learn from it in terms of, I hope that we're helpful for other writers, because I found the producer who optioned it and has completely and utterly championed it ever since, and just been fantastic. Not through any connections with the film industry or anything, and not through my agent actually, but through me, to do with the subject matter of the film. So if you're writing a film about baseball, you might want to find out who's interested in baseball, or if you're writing a film about whatever it is that your film is about, if there is a kind of subject to it, then that's weirdly how I found this producer, because the film is partly set in Lisbon and is about fado music, which is this fantastic music from Portugal. And so it's a bit of a kind of Shirley Valentine story that I'd written. And because it was about fado, I obviously was doing lots of research into fado, and I went to any event that was going on in London that was related to fado, which wasn't very many, but I would go to it. If a fado singer had come over from Portugal to sing, like Marisa or other singers, I would go and see them. Anna Moura, I would go to these concerts, and because I would always get something for my film as well from it, as well as obviously a deeper understanding of this music. And sorry, this is such a long story. You feel free to cut this down so it makes sense. I went to an event. So I went to an event, and then I was in touch with a woman. It was kind of a fado-related event in London. I went to this event. I wrote to the person who put on the event, made a point of introducing myself to them that night and stuff. And I wrote to her afterwards going, I'd really enjoyed it or whatever. And she said, oh, would you mind going on Facebook and leaving a review for us? Because we want to, maybe tour this and get some funding. And I was like, yeah, absolutely. So I went onto the Facebook page of this event. And there were obviously all these comments and reviews from people, but they were all in Portuguese, really, because it was mainly been the Portuguese people who had been there. And there was one person who had left a review in English. And I Googled him, and he was a Golden Globe winning film producer.
Oh, lovely.
Completely kind of randomly, obviously. But there was clearly some connection there. So I guess my takeaway, my lesson, as it were, or what I hope is helpful here, is that you never know quite how you're going to find that person, and you only need one yes to start with. You just need one person who gets it and loves what you've written or whatever, and wants to take it further. And if you can, and I hadn't gone to that event thinking I'm going to find a film producer, but I knew that it would benefit me in some way. I would, like I said, I would learn something. I would, that would help my film or whatever. So I would, it had come about in this rather roundabout way. But I think if you try, sorry, I'm going to be full of quotes. Is it Paul Newman who said, the harder I work, the luckier I get? The more you put various opportunities out there, I guess, in order for something to come back to you, then maybe, that's one of the lessons. And the other lesson is that script was in no way ready to go to that producer at that point. But I just parked it. I just I was like, okay. So I was still, I think at that point, maybe in back and forth with my agent on the script. So it wasn't ready to go out in the world for a long time after that, actually.
Mm.
But we had his name, and so he was one of those first people that we sent the script out to. Turns out my agent did actually had, I don't know, maybe represented somebody who had worked on a film with him, so we could, go, hello, it wasn't completely random.
Mm.
But
Yeah.
I think even if it had been pretty random, then his ears would still have pricked up, I hope, because it was like this kind of music that he completely understood. And I met him for a coffee. So he really liked the script. And when we met for a coffee, it was just before he left London to go and live in Lisbon.
Mm. Wow.
So he was actually the perfect producer. He had lots of contacts in Lisbon and in the Portuguese film industry, which I really wanted to be part of it all, of course.
Right. So what I was hoping you was going to say was, here's the email address you send the script to get it optioned. So you haven't given us that, but I guess what you've given us is thinking a bit more strategically about your script and who it's going to appeal to, and also, I guess, being more expanding your network, not just by going to filmmaking networking events,
Yeah.
because oftentimes when you're in those events, you're surrounded by other people who also want to get their project made. So you've got to widen that pool, and I guess by widening that pool and going outside of that, you're more likely to come into contact with people who could potentially help you. And even if it wasn't a producer, you might have met somebody else there who knew someone who was XYZ. So yeah, that makes sense to me.
Completely.
So what about, we talked about the sort of cement bottom line things that you've learned about screenwriting. Give me some tips for writing good characters.
Ooh. I think when it comes to writing good characters, I really like, and I think audiences like, actually, someone who's kind of at war with themselves in some way. I'm not very good at writing out and out baddies, I think, and antagonists.
Mm.
And I think it's partly because I'm drawn to the idea that we are our own worst enemy. And I think, I think there's something about getting in our own way, which, I was doing actually for years before I then sort of pursued my creative dreams, right? I had to kind of get out of my own way, in the ways in which I was stopping myself. And I'm always really drawn to watching, I think, and writing characters who are who are getting in their way in some way, or at war with themselves in some way. They're not living the life that they could be living, in order to be happy and fulfilled. And you, as the writer, are going to take them on to that change. This is what drives me, and I guess what I tend to do in my films. And that's a very classic kind of film story, right? Your character arc is going to be, you're going to take someone from here to there. And I'll often actually start with the end point. I'll start with this idea of that's the ending and that's where they are. And then you want to reverse engineer almost, because you're going, okay, well, who's the most interesting person to start with, who's going to end up here? And I think, my favorite film, for example, is The Apartment,
Mm.
by Billy Wilder. And, your two main characters in that, C.C. Baxter, played by Jack Lemmon, and Frank Kubelik, played by Shirley MacLaine, are classic examples of characters who are getting in their own way in terms of not getting this happy ending that they deserve. She is she's the other woman. She's the mistress of a married man who will never leave his wife. And her happy ending is Jack Lemmon. That's what she should be going for. And then he is allowing himself to be sort of abused and used by higher ups in the business because he wants to get ahead. And actually, he has to become a mensch, as they say in the film, and stand up for himself in order to then have his true need, and want fulfilled. I mean, it's very clear he wants to be with Frank Kubelik, but he needs to get out of his own way and change in some way in order to get that happy ending. So I think that, the classic kind of thing that a characters want and need is different. They might want this thing, but actually they need that. and they also need to learn something in order to get that. So I think, and as I say, I'm not, it's not to say that you don't also obviously have external obstacles and external antagonists and everything. But and in fact, when it comes to antagonists, I like this idea of, I think Aaron Sorkin said your antagonist always has to have a point. I think that's a really great way of thinking about a compelling antagonist as well, not just some one-dimensional baddie. And I think when it comes to characters behaving badly, whether that's your main character or your antagonist, I think it's really important to have empathy, or to be able to empathize. So you might not agree with how someone's behaving, but you understand where it comes from. And Marty Supreme, for example, is maybe a really good example of that. I know that Marty Supreme, like lots of people, have just kind of dismissed that character, as it were, and just gone, he's so awful. And it's quite interesting, because I was completely primed to not like Marty Supreme, because I'm pretty bad at liking things where they're really dislikable characters. I tend to not be drawn to that at all, actually. But I completely got why Marty was the way he was. You can't divorce the character of Marty Supreme from the fact that he is a young, poor, Jewish, post-war immigrant, with all the horrors of the Second World War and everything that's brought, the survival instinct that is in Marty that leads him to behave the way he behaves to get money to survive. And so I thought he was utterly compelling. And even when he was behaving badly, I had empathy. There was a richness to his character, So I think those are like the chief things for me, I think, when it comes to great characters. And finally, actually, I think it's always interesting to think of characters in relation with each other. So it's actually relationships that are going on screen between all these different people that can also make characters particularly compelling. How are they in relation to other people? And those dynamics that you then see being played out make characters compelling. White Lotus is a really great example of that. I think, you can watch White Lotus. I'm rewatching season 1 at the moment. And it's just, I adore Mike White's writing. I think it's amazing. And I think one thing he does so good is this idea, you can have someone over here who's just like a dick, basically, whatever, but you put them in a scene with this person and suddenly they seem less of a dick. And it's that person who's being a dick, and you see, you can be rooting for a character and then put them in a scene with someone else and actually you're not rooting for them anymore. I think he's amazing at that. And that's again, it's all about creating rich people who are kind of three-dimensional. They're not just out and out baddies. They're not just out and out goodies. They've got flaws. That's
Yes.
what me, I think.
No, that's interesting, all that stuff. And Marty Supreme thing's interesting because I think you just get swept up in his relentless quest, don't you? You just kind of, that becomes the main focus for you as well when you're following that character. When you're starting a script like that and you're thinking about these characters, are you doing massive character descriptions before you start writing, or is this stuff all in the back of your mind? What do you do? What's the actual process for you?
The process it's an interesting one. I'm not somebody who often does or thinks you have to. You can kind of hit, screenwriting people telling you what you should do or how you should do it. This whole idea of like you should know absolutely every single intimate detail about your character and where they came from and what they think of that and what they think of this. And I don't think you necessarily actually have to do all that work. I don't think you have to do that. If it's helpful, fill your boots, do whatever works for you. I tend to be more character driven than idea driven, I guess. I don't feel like I'm particularly sort of plot driven and idea driven, but I think either way, even if you actually come up with an idea of a plot type thing, the best thing to do is actually go then as quickly as you can to character and kind of go, okay, well, if this is the idea is that, there's a bus and if it goes below a certain speed, it's going to blow up. If that's your great hook sort of thing, you then want to actually go to, okay, who's an interesting character to be on that journey. I think when I'm coming up with ideas or the start of something, I do create a kind of characters document, I guess. and I will be just sort of chucking in any random thoughts I have about those characters. I will create a document which is dialogue, little lines I hear maybe. If I start to picture these people and imagine them and what they're doing and what they might, what they're saying to each other, I'll chuck that in. I'll do a document that's called Moments I See.
Nice. Yeah.
Which is just the kind of, oh, I see a moment where they're doing this, or they go here, or whatever. And as I said, I often will work backwards, I guess. I often I think no, always do see sort of the end of the film. And I think that's the other thing about sort of writing, you don't want to think about the audience, because you have to just think about what you love, I think, and what you feel and what you want to write. But I think in terms of the idea of a feeling that you want to create, you might not articulate it in that way, but I think it's helpful to go, oh, this is the ending. Okay, I tend to always write things, for example, that are uplifting at the end and are going to leave you feeling good, right? And I hope I take you on a journey where you laugh and you cry, and at the end, but the end is always uplifting. I think, I believe people are good, essentially. I believe the universe is benevolent, essentially, and my films and point of view will always tend to reflect that. So but I'll often have this idea of like the ending is this, and everyone's going to walk out the cinema feeling like this, or it's like this film, or it's like that film. And then I work, as I say, work backwards and kind of go, okay, so this is where I want this character to end. So therefore I need to take them on the following journey. Sort of thing. It often starts that way around.
Yeah. And I guess the way I would do it, because I thought you were going to say, oh, I don't prescribe to that, I just write it, but you do make notes. And I think it is a good thing to do, because even if you might forget something, an idea you've had or something really cool that you want to put into it. So I've got a book that I just throw stuff in, but I guess I'm like you, I don't do paragraph after paragraph about a character. I'll more sort of plop things in that I must remember later on. So you're talking there about not necessarily thinking about what the audience Have you written anything, or have you ever been in a situation where you have written something that's designed to be something? Do you know what I mean? Whether that be something that's going to sell, or something that somebody's in particular asked for this exact thing.
Yes, I guess, but I guess the ideal is that it's the commerce and art stuff, I guess, and where it means. I mean, I think I'm very lucky in a way, because I think genuinely my taste is pretty commercial. So this is completely genuine. But this is true for any writer. My advice for any writer is to write what you love, right? And what you love might be something that is pretty niche, or what you write, it might be something that is very commercial, but I think it's just leaning into what you really love. And so I've never, even when I've been a writer for hire, so that's it. Yeah, so I have been absolutely hired to write. So I've been hired to say, write there was a director producer in America who had the rights to a true British story, and he wanted to find a British writer to write that screenplay. So I've written that, for example. And I've written a couple of indie features now with a fantastic production company, and that's me and them sort of working out the story together a little bit, and having some collaborative sort of back and forth on the creation of that story in the world and the story we're going to tell. And the starting point again actually is often what kind of films do we like in that space. And I would do this anyway. When I got hired to write that one, I said that was based on a true story. That was like a sports movie, essentially. It's like a British, it's a classic kind of British underdog film sort of thing, but related to a sport. And I was just going off and watching loads of sports movies, or one of the other ones I've written with that production company that I've written for them is a road movie. And so we kind of all went off and watched road movies and kind of said, oh, actually, we want something like this, we want something like that. And I think there's nothing wrong with that. We're all inspired, right? And I think you can watch something and be inspired and kind of go, well, I don't want to do that, for example. And I think that's really valid. So I think, yeah, sorry, remind me of
No, I guess it was. I guess where I was coming from was I'm thinking of the first-time filmmaker who is trying to make a movie, but they're also conscious that if they don't make something that's going to sell, they might not get to make another one. So I was just interested in how that line works for you. But I guess it's fortunate that you're interested in stuff that's mainstream, and obviously the people you're working with are kind of want the thing that you produce.
Yeah.
So
I guess that's the key thing, because it doesn't matter whether what I want, what a writer, whether you have mainstream or commercial taste or not, it's about finding your people. So that's the thing. And I think, you can, because you're going to spend a lot of time together and stuff, and you want, and when you've written a script, say for somebody, and you've, and it's off, they're the ones taking it out in the world and trying to get the money and the cast and the crew and all that kind of thing. So I think my advice is that you absolutely should always write what you love, and you should lean into what you love and what your tastes are, and don't write what you think you should be writing, because I think, well, it's not much fun apart from anything else. It's not.
So you've never just gone, oh, I could just bang this out, send it out, like sort of formulaic thing, and I might get a bit of money for it. That's never been an option for you.
No, because what's the fun in that?
Yeah.
I mean, seriously, I think we need to really enjoy the process, like why we're doing it, because exactly, it might never get made. Someone may never shoot, or whatever. This is an absolute reality of the business. You can be a writer for hire and you can be a working screenwriter, and it can still be incredibly difficult, as we know, to get films over the line, whether they're small or big. And I think so you have to. But apart from anything else, it's not even just about making that. It means it will make it enjoyable for you. Although that is said, I still think you have to love it for its own sake. I think it is where the gold is. You might think it's over here in this thing, but actually the gold is in you. We're a bit really naff about this, but
this is going to be on a t-shirt. Go on. Andrea Mann, the gold is in you. Get them on your website, buy them now. No, I like it. Carry on. Sorry.
It is. That's the sort of magic, and it's bringing you to whatever it is that you want to write, whatever it is that floats your boat, the genre that you love, whatever it is. It's that stuff that's really, that is the gold. And then in terms, because if you write for yourself rather than this like one eye on the market or the industry, you are going to create something that's authentic and has come from the heart. And I'm not saying you also, when you combine that with craft, right? So when you combine that stuff, that's not enough on its own, as it were. But then craft and skill isn't enough on its own. If you've not got anything to say, or you're wearing a different hat that's not really authentically you, if you can combine these two things and get that out in the world, that's what resonates with people. And then it's a question of finding the people that it resonates with. And, we all get rejections, we all get passes on our scripts. This is all completely normal. And it doesn't mean that there's anything necessarily wrong with your script or bad about it or anything, or it's not good enough. It's just finding the right person. I mean, my other spec that I've written is an 80s jukebox musical. Now, for some people, that is an absolute idea of hell. For me, it was a massive labour of love and a real challenge that I set myself as well, but it found a home. There's a couple of producers that picked it up for shopping agreements and just love it and get it. And you just need, if you write, by definition, I think, again, if you lean into who you are and what you like and what you love, you will find your people. But, it will be a good connection because they genuinely get it too. And as you will know, so much of this stuff in the business, whether you're a director, I guess, or a writer or a producer, is will, right? It's having the will, to keep going with something, to keep wanting to raise the money to make it, to keep putting it out there in the world, to, you know, you've just got to keep going and keep going and keep going. And if you're going to go on that journey for something, whether it's something you've started with you or didn't start with you, you've got to really like it, right? You've got to, you know, and not want to just do it for the sake of it. I think life's too short. I think I definitely, maybe also because I came to writing quite late relatively. I think I was like, I just have to flip and go for it. I just have to write something that's just full of me and full of stuff that I love. And the kind of film I'd want to see in the cinema, I just went for it. I was like, I don't have time. I don't have years to find my voice. I have to just, you know,
All on the page. Yeah, it's interesting because you and I always bang on about this with filmmaking. What you can end up doing is when you're making a film, you get so focused on needing to finish it that you forget to actually enjoy making it. And I guess I've never really thought about the script writing part. Oftentimes what you can do is you get, right, I've got to get this script finished because I want to make it, and you're not actually stopping and going, oh, this is the fun part. I can enjoy putting all this stuff together. So I guess my last question, and I'm conscious, this is, if this were an Andrea Mann film, we'd want to end it on a positive, but this isn't. This is a Jim Eves podcast, and all of my films are tragedies and have a downbeat ending. So I'm sorry that you try and turn this into a positive. Talk to me about where are you? Where do you stand with AI? And have you noticed anything? Have you noticed any changes already with that? Do you use it at all? Give me the kind of, what's your view on it all?
I am utterly opposed to it as a writer. And wow, no, I don't use it. I will never use it. I don't encourage other people to use it. I resent the implication or the forcing it on creatives. I'll concentrate on the screenwriting side of things because I can't speak for whether it's useful to people as a director or useful, you know, in medicine or anything. So I'm just going to stick to this. Before we get into stealing artists' work and not paying them for it, to the environmental damage, to the fact that the people running these companies are also the people, say, bankrolling Donald Trump in the United States and fascism. So all that one side.
Put that to a side, yeah.
Which is also why I don't care whether it's any good or not because of all this other stuff. Do you know what I mean? Like, that's for me. I don't care how good it's getting, and I'm not going to dismiss how good it is, if you know what I mean, in the sense of it, how great a screenplay it can produce or greater special effects it can produce for somebody. I don't doubt that for a second, or it's going to get better and all of that kind of thing, that stuff. But all these other negative reasons why I would just I don't want to be part of that. I don't want to what's the word, and contribute to that. All that aside, in terms of being a writer and writing, and my advice for the writers, it maybe goes back to what I was just saying about the process and enjoying the process. Writing, AI is completely outcome driven, not process driven, right? So AI, you put in a prompt, give me a picture of a dog in a top hat, boom, there it is, right? And it's kind of funny for a few seconds, and it's like, because the process is the way, you know, the process is the whole point of it all, as far as I'm concerned. The process of creating anything, but I'll talk about writing, but the process of writing is where the joy is, it's where the fulfillment is, it's where the meaning is, it's where the frustrations are and the problem solving are, and it's through solving those problems and getting better at it that you grow as a writer, as a creative, you grow as a person because you get over yourself. That stuff about getting in your own way, you learn. When I started writing, one big thing I had to unpick in myself was that I'd always quit while I was ahead. Always, in life, in jobs, in relationships, because I was really scared to sort of push on through something that was difficult. Learning to do that transformed my life, and it transformed my writing, it transformed my career, because I learned that if I kept going through this thing and learned to problem solve and learned to overcome challenges and obstacles, I could do it, you know? And that musical, for example, is a great example of that. It's the thing I'm most proud of having written, because it was the most difficult thing to write. The satisfaction you get at the top of the mountain, right? You could have been parachuted in. AI could have parachuted you in at the top of the mountain and go, wow, what an amazing view. But the point is that you flipping did it. You went from the bottom of the mountain. You went from this bit where you had no idea what to do with this script, where you had no idea how to solve this particular problem in it. And if you stick with the process and you stick with yourself, and you can get there. And that's incredible. And it makes you a better writer. It means, like, as I say, that means that's how you literally learn a craft, right? And how you learn a skill. And if you try and hack that in any way, I mean, you might still get something here that looks like you're at the top of the mountain, but it's not going to be as good, and it's not going to give you all that stuff. And then this is actually even before we get into this whole idea of the human condition, and this idea, we're bringing ourselves and our human behavior and our human condition and what we want to say about the world to something, to a piece that in a way that a computer algorithm or a computer program can't do. And all the stuff around it perpetuates things. AI can only learn, it's just this program that's just whatever's being fed into it. So in what way can that innovate or tell new stories? We desperately need different voices, not just the ones we've been hearing since the dawn of time in our arts, So my advice is, you're doing yourself a disservice, I think. If you use AI as a writer, because I bet your bottoms up that I would believe in you as a writer. You have it in you to get to that, to solve those problems. Or maybe it's about collaborating with other human beings to solve those problems, or to create great art together. Again, it's the joy of it all, surely, is things like collaboration. It's, say, if you want to write an animated thing, it's working with animators or learning the skills of animation yourself. Yeah, I'm a big, as you can tell, I'm a big sort of fan of the process, and the process is the way. And because I think that's kind of partly the point of it all, apart from also this idea of just sharing our human experience, right, and our human condition with others. That, again, surely that's the point of art.
Yeah.
The fact that
you've managed to turn it into a positive, and I feel like you've got another T-shirt there. What is it? The process is the point. It's the other Andrea Mann T-shirt. 20% to Honest Filmmaker. But thank you so much for that. That's all really positive way at looking at writing. I would definitely agree. There are some ways you can use AI as a filmmaker if you can set aside all the moral stuff, what it pays for, etc. But writing, yeah, definitely I would avoid that. Otherwise you're just going to get something that's been written before spat out in a slightly different form. Yeah,
and you won't enjoy it as much. It may feel like you do, because it's like giving you and I see that AI can be sort of advised to screenwriters in the sense of, I don't know, writing a log line for you, or writing a synopsis, even like treatment. That seems like quite an obvious way of using it. Rather than come up with 10 ideas for a car chase scene or whatever, the actual idea of the boring work. But the fact is that boring work is also stuff you need to be able to do really professionally as a writer, because you will be having to write outlines and treatments, and it's all it's all part of that. You might go, being in the script is the fun part, but that stuff is necessary too. And apart from anything else, that stuff, having to write the boring stuff, helps you understand your story better, understand what might be, where you've got some plot holes, or or stuff that's not fully worked out before you go into script, all that kind of stuff. And so I think every part of it makes you a better writer, and every part of it helps you in some way, even the stuff that's not, you think's a bit boring or isn't so much fun. Don't try and hack your way out of everything. You're better than that. There you go. You personally, and all your listeners. I believe in you guys. I do.
Wow, what a pep talk.